Welcome back after the coffee break, and welcome to our session. We are going to be talking to somebody who is representing the view of a smaller country that feels that its sovereignty is endangered by a much larger aggressive neighbor. And no guesses as to what the country is. I'd like to welcome Marc Garneau, Canada's former foreign minister and a retired astronaut, to our panel. Welcome.
Good morning, Jan. Good to be with you.
Thanks very much for joining us. During this session, during this event, we've talked a lot about the risks to democracy. This year has had an awful lot of talk about the role that the United States plays and how the U.S. has shifted from being, I guess, a core member of the liberal world order to, by some accounts, a potential threat to that liberal world order. Here in Denmark, there's obviously the issue of Greenland has come up again and again, and we'll be hearing again later this afternoon. What's your read on Donald Trump's intentions towards Canada? Do you think that he poses a threat to Canadian sovereignty?
Not to sovereignty, although he's made lots of noises in that area, talking about making Canada the 51st state of the United States. I think it's typical Donald Trump. It's an opening sort of statement. He likes to knock countries off their back foot. It's his sort of negotiating approach to many, many things. And I think that, to make the statement once may be viewed as a bit of a joke, perhaps in bad taste, but a joke nevertheless. But he has repeatedly said it. It's not going to happen. The vast majority of Canadians are not interested in the slightest in becoming part of the United States, and we're making that extremely clear. In fact, he may have done us a great favor by sort of stoking our Canadian pride. Canadians are not typically very demonstrative when it comes to showing their national pride, but he has certainly found a way to generate a great deal of pride within the country, and it's very, very clear that Canadians are not going to put up with this.
If you don't think that he's serious, what's he doing? What's the goal to take a very trusted friend and ally? I can see on the wall behind you, you've got a commemorative thing with an American and a Canadian flag on it, and turn Canadians into hostile neighbors. What's the point?
I think it is part of his larger scheme to, with respect to tariffs, to change the world order. There's no question about it. We're not going to go back to the way things used to be. And part of his approach in terms of making it very clear that the United States wants to benefit more from trade with other countries. In Canada's case, he started off by saying that both Canada and Mexico were countries that were allowing far too much fentanyl into the country, and therefore he was going to impose tariffs, which he did. Notwithstanding the fact that Canada is responsible for less than 1% of fentanyl that enters into the United States. And then, as though, he needed to emphasize those things more, he decided that he was also going to impose tariffs on aluminum and steel and car parts, which is a very tightly integrated industry with the United States. All of this to make the point that he felt that because the United States has a trade deficit with Canada, which is in fact the case if you exclude the service industries, he felt that that was Canada treating the United States unfairly, which is a fallacious argument, of course. If we sell more to the United States than they sell to us, it's because they want more of our stuff than we want from them. And if one excluded the fact that they import over 4 million barrels of oil per day from Canada on a daily basis because of their very large appetite for oil, they in fact would be benefiting from a trade surplus. So to blame us for not being fair with them because we have a trade surplus is another example of him trying to come up with an excuse to threaten Canada in this particular case on the trade front.
But do you think that he is looking to have a slightly better trade deal? Or, I mean, he's said multiple times that Canada produces nothing that America wants to buy. Don't need the lumber, don't need the steel, don't need anything else that Canada produces. And that he has some other motive. That I guess the one of these would be try to break Canada economically so that the 51st state alternative becomes more attractive.
In some ways, that might be his long-term objective. But of course, just about everything you stated there is totally false. Starting with the fact that you say that he says out loud that Canada doesn't have anything that the United States wants. Now, either he is blissfully ignorant of the actual details of the trade. I mean, Canada and the United States, if you add up our imports and exports, is the largest trading partnership in the world between the two, if you add up the imports and exports. They are very dependent on our aluminum because they don't produce enough. They are very dependent on our potash, particularly their farmers. They're dependent on our uranium. They will be eventually dependent on our critical minerals and rare earth minerals. There are a host of products that are made in Canada that Mr. Trump would like to own, as if Canada was the 51st state. And he might know this, and this is part of the reason he talks this way, or it's possible that he is a bit ignorant of the actual products that cross back and forth between the two countries.
It's astonishing that a well-connected former foreign minister has difficulty trying to work out what is the ultimate end goal of Canada's closest ally and largest trade partner. It's a surprising situation. Prime Minister Carney has taken a fairly hardline approach to Trump and to the United States, which seems to be paying off. Is that a model that other countries should be following? If you look at the UK and others, that you do get a sense that many countries are trying to sweet talk Trump, hoping for a good deal on the side. Is the stronger edged Canadian approach the one that actually should be taken?
I personally believe so, yes. The charm offensive is not going to work. It is absolutely doomed to failure with Mr. Trump. That's the kind of person that he is. He deals with realities, and I think that the hard-nosed approach, even-keeled but hard-nosed approach that Prime Minister Carney is taking is the right one. And Prime Minister Carney has an enormous amount of credibility in terms of his economic know-how, having been Governor of the Bank of Canada and Governor of the Bank of England, having worked in the private sector, having worked in government. And he, I think, has a sort of a clear-eyed view of what needs to be done. Now, that's not to say that Canada is not going to feel some pain. If we carry through on our approach to Mr. Trump, I'm sure that there are going to be some punishing tariffs that will result from these things, at least for a while. Historically, of course, we know that tariffs never work. They will ultimately be doomed to failure, but there may be some uncomfortable moments. And the thing is, Canadians are ready for this. They really are ready for it because the run-up to the recent election has made it in Canada, has made it very, very clear that Canadians are ready to hunker down and to live with some discomfort while knowing that we will also be inflicting pain to the United States in order to get through this difficult period. Eventually, we think that something will settle out at the other end. It may take years, but eventually all tariffs are doomed to failure.
Prime Minister Carney has talked about the relationship with the United States, the old relationship being over. Something new has to take its place. There is a strong effort to boost trade ties, both east and west, with the Pacific and with Europe and the rest of the world. Is that working? Is that a way to diminish the impact of the shift away from the U.S.?
It has to be one of our objectives. We, of course, in Canada have a trade agreement with Europe, CETA, where we are members of CETA. We have one also with the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement on Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is of 12 countries, mostly on each side of the Pacific. We have individual trade agreements with countries like Korea. The thing is, Canada has lived beside the United States now forever, and because of that, over 75% of our trade has been with them because it's been so damn convenient, and we've been able to satisfy each other's requirements. This is a wake-up call for Canada that we need to cultivate and work very hard on developing trade relationships with our European allies, with our Asian allies, and not to sort of fall back to the easy position of the United States. Of course, that presupposes that those countries are interested in trading with Canada, but we think we have things to offer, and we think that if we work together, yes, it will be to our benefit, and ultimately we will be less dependent on the United States, which is the ultimate goal here.
Now, Canada, it's not just an economic relationship. There's both countries are founding members of NATO. There's NORAD. There's a very old and intricate military relationship. Where does this challenge, this threat from the U.S. leave Canada's position in NATO, and where do you think what situations does it put NATO in?
Well, we're a founding member of NATO, as you point out, and we intend to continue to be a partner in NATO. In some respects, Mr. Trump has done us a favor because Canada, and I'll say it out loud here, has been less than forthcoming in spending adequate amounts with respect to defense. We're not pulling our share of the burden within NATO, and this has been very much a wake-up call. In fact, everything that Mr. Trump has done in the past month or two has made us realize that we need to focus on four things. One is beefing up our military. We have a good military, but it's not big enough. Secondly, we need to reduce or eliminate what we call interprovincial trade barriers. We have provinces in our country, and we have trade barriers between the provinces, which does not make any sense. So what Mr. Trump has done is given us the motivation to address that. The third is that Canada needs to work on its labor productivity as well. We're lagging with respect to that. And finally, we need to find ways to speed up the regulatory process in approving very large infrastructure projects across the country. So in some senses, what Mr. Trump has done is given us a wake-up call. And in order for us to reduce our dependence on the United States, there are a number of things that we need to do, and we're getting on with those things.
Until now, there hasn't been much reason to try to not buy American weapons systems, to try to think about the dangers posed by that. There was some talk before the election that Prime Minister Carney should take a hard look at the F-35 deal and maybe decide to switch to Gripens or a European jet and cancel the rest of the F-35 order. And is there, on the F-35s and more broadly, should Canada be taking a warier look at its dependence on U.S. weapons systems?
I think that's one of the things that we are looking at, amongst other things, not just defense procurement, but with respect to other areas where we say to ourselves, look, our current source of of a product or a service is the United States. But if our overall objective is to reduce our dependence on the United States, then everything is on the table. And we should be able to look at, does it make more sense for us to stick with that, or for security reasons or other reasons, or does it make sense if we're trying to build a relationship with the European Union or with countries of the Indo-Pacific for us to look elsewhere for some of these things, because those are the kinds of initiatives, defense procurement, that tend to build long-term relationships.
Prime Minister Carney's first foreign visits were to the UK and France. The King is coming for the throne speech to Parliament. Is Europe the direction that that Canada is looking at? We even had a story at Politico a week or two ago looking at the legal barriers to Canada potentially becoming a member of the EU. Is this the pull now is towards Europe?
So definitely it's a poll, and Mr. Carney, having been governor of the Bank of England, is very, very much familiar with the situation that exists in Europe. At the same time, Canada does have an Indo-Pacific strategy, and so we have also turned towards countries such as Japan, Korea, Australia, and we want to strengthen relationships across the Pacific there as well. So I would say it's not a single pole. I would say it's multiple poles.
Anders Fogh Rasmussen has this idea that he was kicking around of creating what he calls a D7, the sort of leading 7 democratic powers: EU, UK, Canada, and then the Indo-Pacific 4, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand, and that these countries should band together and create a new liberal world order based both on military and economic ties among themselves. Does that make sense to try to look for a new democratic and security architecture that does not involve the United States?
I think it is important for us to recognize that in today's world, remember, for the longest time we've had sort of the G7, but the G7 has only included one country from the Indo-Pacific, and that's Japan. And I think that it does make sense in today's world, where the geopolitical center of the world has in some ways migrated to the Indo-Pacific, with obviously China and its overwhelming presence there. And it does make sense for us to begin to foster stronger relationships between countries like Canada, and I would like to think of the United States as being equally interested, and they are involved with some alliances on the Pacific side, but with countries like Korea and Australia. I mean, to me, it would make sense that they be part of the larger fraternity of economic countries than currently the 5 European countries, or I beg your pardon, the 4 European countries: Japan and Canada and the United States. It should be more global.
In a few minutes, we'll be hearing from the Deputy Prime Minister of Greenland. As a Canadian, do you have advice for him and for Panamanian officials who also feel potentially threatened by the U.S.? What should they be doing? How should they be reacting?
Well, it's always delicate to give advice to other countries about what they should do in their own country, but watching it from the sidelines, the reaction of Greenlanders and the Danish government, as well as Panama, I hope they take a similar approach to Canada, which is to say, essentially, to put it crudely, keep your hands off us.
So we'll see if he takes that advice. We've got one question from the audience. How does Canada envision space security? What role do you think NATO should play in space?
So it's a very good question, and it's one that I've been involved with up until, a little bit recently with Anders Fogh Rasmussen, who's looking at the whole question of how do we develop space in a way that it doesn't become the Wild West, because as you probably are aware, there is now a proliferation of spacecraft being sent up into space. I mentioned probably the best known, which is Elon Musk's constellation called Starlink, which has now got well over 7,000 satellites in space. Space is a common frontier, and it's used for a common purpose, either for very practical reasons such as communicating, keeping us all connected down on the surface of the planet, doing Earth observation, doing weather observation, doing science, those kinds of things. And it is something that we have to bear in mind, that it has to be shared. It's not acceptable for one country or a small number of countries to dominate that sphere, because it pushes everybody else out. But in addition to that, there has to be a regulatory process involved in putting spacecraft up there so they're not banging into each other and they're not interfering with each other's frequencies. There is a body called the ITU that partially looks at that, but not completely. So I think that space is an area that requires a lot of humanity's attention at this point, because it's one of these things that's getting away from us at this point with the unfettered development of space for very good reasons, but reasons that can get out of hand, if I can put it that way. Now, whether it's related to NATO, that's a more complicated, whether NATO gets involved, it's a more complicated question as soon as you bring the military in. But on the civilian side of things, I think it's important for all of the countries of the world to agree amongst each other that we need to develop space in an orderly, regulated fashion.
So sharing, looking out for the common good, rule of law and regulation. I wonder if that's a message that will get picked up a little bit more widely. Thank you very much for agreeing to take part in the panel today. Marc Garneau from Canada. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jan.